Well, greetings, viewers, voyeurs, and welcome to another edition of Jamboree on the Breakfast Club. This is me, Got That Funk, and my friend Rob, Dev Shell 2. How you doing, Rob?
I'm all right. How you doing, Paul?
Yeah, I'm always well, except for when I'm not. Um, yeah, that's been a really interesting week for me personally. I've had quite an emotional one because of as you know, my personal circumstances will be changing soon, and so I'm like, doing all that thing you got to do. If you're going to move away, you got to tie up loose ends, make sure everybody knows how I feel about them and all that kind of crap, because it does, even though I will be back frequently, um, this year, probably not because of all the restrictions due to coronavirus and everything. So, and when I go at the end of June, I have to quarantine myself straight away. I have to go back into lockdown again. Right, probably that will be the end of lockdown here, and then I'll probably go straight into lockdown again over there. So it's going to be a long year in terms of like social mobility and doing things, having fun in a normal way. This is going to be quite a quiet year for most of us, I think, because of the lockdown. Where you're at? Are people out and about now on the weekend and stuff? Because it's obviously a 3-day weekend this weekend.
Not really. Not
Yeah.
really. Yeah, no. People in the New York, New Jersey area have been pretty good about quarantine and social distancing and stuff. You know?
I suppose it's because you've been hit so hard by it. So it's to you
Yeah,
guys. It's
yeah, and it's the only real region in the country where it's on the downward trend. So everybody
right.
else is still going up.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me considering everyone's behavior. And this is another reason why it just kind of confounds me that they are still just pushing to hurry up and open right back up. And nothing's really better now. Nothing's better. This is what really gets me about it is no facts have changed. The virus is no less contagious than it was, right? Um,
Hmm.
and the only reason that we have the level of death that we have daily now is so we've had control measures for 2 months, and without those control measures, it will spike right back up to one person infects every three people, and that's when it gets out of control. When the reproduction rate is 3 by 3, you cannot stay on top of it. You know. Oh, bless him.
When he's quiet, sure. He likes to shout.
Yeah, sure. Everybody likes attention, man. Well, at least me. I sure did. I was just like that. I always wanted attention. Hello, Damon. How you doing, little man? Ah! That's funny.
Out. Ooh, out. Where you going? Oh, okay, go on. Get down. You're down.
Well, where I am, the 2 weekends ago now, the Prime Minister of the UK did a very confusing announcement, letting some people go back to work but not others. And I mean, his announcement was basically something like this: uh, "Do go to work if you can, but don't take public transport unless you have to. But if you do have to, do take public transport, but try not to take public transport. And if you can avoid going to work, do avoid going to work. But if you have to work, go ahead and go to work. And if you have to meet with people in a park, you can meet with up to 2 people at a time, but no more than groups of 3 at a time. So you plus 2 people." And of course, people will take whatever the rule is and triple it. So today, when I went out shopping, and there's the park is full of people. Everyone's distant, and from all the groups of people are distant, but it's just like little packed group here, packed group of people there, whatever. Because I think there's an awful lot of confusion right now. Because I think the the instructions are kind of deliberately vague. You know.
I don't. I mean, there's a lot of that kind of stuff here too. Um, it's hard. Oh yeah. Especially it's worse here because we don't have any kind of national strategy. So it's state by state, and different governors are doing different things, and kind of makes the efforts of one state kind of useless.
Sure. What do you think about day before yesterday? Trump was on television saying that he's going to declare church an essential service.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. He's just trying to win support for re-election.
It's transparent, and like what really gets me is like, I mean, you can't even pretend that church is an essential service. That completely bends what essential is. You know, church is essential in the same way caviar is essential. You know. You're right.
I'll be right back.
All right, yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So, hi, Green Machine. How are you today? All right. Hope you're having a good day. I've had a rather long one today because I didn't sleep last night on Friday night. I haven't slept, so I'm working on fumes at the moment, burning fumes. It's what's it say here? Let's go for that. Oops, hang on. People aren't insulted by transparent efforts to sway them. That's an interesting observation, and you're probably right. I mean, this really kind of blows me away about the current zeitgeist, and that's been true for virtually since even before Trump was president. Is that I mean, Donald Trump just gets licensed to get away with stuff that no previous president would have ever gotten away with, and it just keeps on happening. And you keep on saying, "Oh, well, no one before would have got away with this. They surely won't let him get away with this." And yeah, I am consistently confused and vexed why Trump gets a pass on everything. It's not that he just gets a pass on partisan issues. He gets a pass on everything. He can be the say the stupidest tweet or like the other day when he's threatening to bloody governors with retaliation. He threatened the governor. He basically committed extortion right there in public because the president of the United States was saying that he was going to deny a state its due funding if the state enacted policies that the president didn't like. And a president is not a king, and it's not supposed to be a dictator. You're not supposed to be able to rule in America by diktat. You're not supposed to be able to threaten to withhold from states and therefore withhold from citizens money that is rightfully theirs. That money does not belong to President Trump. It's the country's money. And so for him to be using that as leverage is not only illegal, but it's morally obscene. It's basically Trump treating the Treasury like it's his own money. It's our money. So I've got pretty strong feelings about it, as you can probably tell. Yeah. Let's see what you got over here. Oh, okay. Hello, AOD. How you doing? I'm glad to see you here. Sorry that you're not going to come on camera today, but it's good to have you in the room anyway. Please feel free to pipe in. DevShell too. At the moment, if you weren't here for that, he's just doing a little bit of domestic god or domestic goddessing. Godding. I'm familiar with the term domestic goddess, but I've never ever heard the term domestic god. But I guess that would be the proper connotation. I'm just reading here. Green Machine says, government will be able to do what it wants as long as enough people are comfortable enough despite it. Yeah, true enough. I think it actually says that in the Declaration of Independence, but in more sort of grandiose language. I think if I can remember the quote, mankind are disposed to suffer evils so long as they are sufferable, rather than right themselves of wrongs by abolishing forms which have long been established, or something like that. In other words, people will suffer through almost anything until it finally breaks them, and then they have to turn and revolt. Hello, Curious One. How you doing? Yeah, I am currently just waiting for Rob to come back because he's doing his thing with the family over there. But hope you guys are all doing well. It's nice to see everybody active in the chat. We've got 4 people in the room and 3 people in the chat. So whoever person number 4 is out there, hello to you as well. Anyway, so yeah, yeah, I'm just like on every single week that goes by, it's just I don't know. It's a menagerie of chaos right now with everything that goes on with the Trump regime and everything. And I'm personally so tired of daily drama. I'm so tired of you know all the bloody dog whistles and stuff like that. I'm so tired of the open racism as well as the dog whistles. Open racism is obviously worse, but that's not going to go away if Trump goes away. I mean, racism is a problem that's much bigger than one man. But I do feel very strongly that Trump enables and not just enables, but even incites racism from people. The attacks on synagogues and other places, for example, not a good sign. I thought I would have hoped anyway that we should be past that kind of thing, but obviously not. And especially, week before last or whatever, when we saw that footage of Breonna Taylor, not saw footage, but heard about that story and stuff. I talked about that last week as well, obviously. The situation just seems to be so toxic and so far beyond anybody's ability to sort of reel it back. But what you cannot do is reel it back with Donald Trump as president. The problem is only going to get worse while he's president. It's not going to get better while he's president. And it might not get better for some time after he's president, because the problem, as I say, is I watch a YouTuber called Nappy Headed Jojoba, and she says, what's her phrase? She says it's not that there's institutional racism. She says it's not that there's racism in the system. Racism is the system. That's her point of view, and I obviously have to defer because I did not grow up with that heritage and on that side of the culture. I have no idea what it feels like. Everybody has probably experienced some level of racism directed at them from some group of people at some time. But what I've ever had to contend with in the accumulation of my entire life probably doesn't equal 1 month for most people of color in America. So that's the disparity that I personally perceive anyway. Because what I list off, I could probably count in like a minute. Whereas, I think people who have suffered frequent and if you suffer frequent discrimination, even if it's just taunting, like verbal taunting and stuff like that, if that goes on for your whole life, it's going to give you a chip on your shoulder. Yeah, Green Machine says it's easy to think we're past that when you're from California. Well, yeah, that is true. One of my friends from California says he constantly has to remind himself that California is not representative of America. It's a bit of an outlier when it comes to cultural trends and maladies. And in some ways, California is ahead of the trends, but in other ways, there's we are different in California. And it looks now that at first anyway, when I move back to America, I'll be living in Colorado for a while instead of California. But we'll see. I think I'm probably going to end up settling in Colorado in the middle of this upcoming summer. So that's pretty cool. What's this one say? You think classism is the system and racism is a subset of classism? You could probably make a stronger argument for that than what I said, for sure. Because classism is a system that exists in most societies to different degrees. Like when I first came here to the UK, I was at what they call the tail end of what they called the class system in this country. Once upon a time, say in the 70s and 80s and before that, if you were working class in Britain, you were going to marry a working class person. that was it. If you were poor, you know, you were going to marry a poor person, and if you were wealthy, you were not going to marry a middle class person or a poor person. You just wouldn't. It wasn't done, you know, and it was sort of on its way to becoming much more entrenched. But then, you know, the 80s and 90s, they sort of started to leave that aside, and they tried. John Major said when he became prime minister that they wanted to create a classless society, which sounds great, but you know, it's just political fluff, really. You know, nothing happened, nothing changed. They didn't create a classless society. I can tell you that for free. But yeah, I think classism is definitely an issue because almost no matter what, people will segregate themselves into income groups because we do have this sort of, I don't want to say innate, but maybe we have a tendency towards looking down on people who we see as in a lower social substrata than us for whatever reason. That's the reason racists look down on other races. That's the reason people who are more sort of snobby look down on people who make less money, that kind of thing. At least that's my thinking. What do you reckon, Rob?
Yes.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. Oh God, that's funny.
I mean, yeah. I don't think it's like innate, but I just think it's taught. You know? We teach those
Yeah.
kinds of things, and we don't even realize it.
Well, I mean, there's certain things that government is capable of accomplishing, and certain things that government is beyond the government's control. Like culture is beyond the government's control. Culture has to change spontaneously from within. You can't necessarily force, I don't think anyway, a top-down cultural change. Having said that, back in 1963, when JFK made his address about African Americans, and that was one of my favorite speeches of the 60s, that speech. But he was basically saying that that legislation can only do so much, and he said the real changes have to take place across dinner tables, not at Congress.
And culture doesn't change gradually either. It changes in fits and starts. So
Yeah,
it's
give me an example. Give me an example of when it changes really fast and suddenly from your point of view.
1969.
Stonewall.
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of stuff. I mean, last summer, there was 50th anniversaries of all kinds of things. I mean, it was amazing. Woodstock and Stonewall, and I mean, and it was just 1969 was like this flashpoint. That one year where culture just took a giant step. Um,
Yeah,
fell
I
back in
agree.
some areas. Fell back in some areas since then, but that's the way culture works.
Well, that's the year we landed on the moon, for example.
Yeah, yeah. It was a big year.
That's something that I kind of like. I feel quite privileged to have been alive at the time we were doing the moon shots. I was like, what, 7 when we landed on the moon the first time, and obviously it was a pretty big event, as I'm sure you can appreciate. But the what really gets me is it's hard because we've been living for such a long time in a kind of depressed, like emotionally depressed situation for at least 10 years, I think, where people have felt like the country's slipping away from them or whatever. And so it's really easy for people who were not alive, for example, during the space program or during the moon landings, rather, because the feeling of optimism and looking forward to the future was in the air in those days. I mean, the future was your friend in those
Right.
days.
I mean, but those were programs that the government made a big deal about. There were programs that the school systems made a big deal about. They were fully funded. Congress was happy to give the money to NASA and to different programs that were going to help the space program. We lost the will to do that. And when we lost the will as the government to do those kinds of things, hope kind of dissipates. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson had a great speech about that. He gave his presentation talking about losing hope, And so then we lost hope as a country when we stopped funding the sciences, when we stopped funding space exploration of the way that it should be funded. So that's when we
Wow.
lost hope. So you look back at like the 60s, they kept saying about, the kitchen of the future, the kitchen, the world of tomorrow, the cars of tomorrow, and we don't do that as a country anymore.
No, that's right. I mean, we don't even really plan for the future in any sort of long-term meaningful way. I mean, everything's like this year and next year. That's about as far as they seem to plan. Is about a year ahead. You know, um, and maybe that's a misperception on my part. Maybe I'm not aware of more long-term plans, but they certainly don't seem to get a lot of press. If they are active in a more sort of 30-year, 40-year, 50-year sort of plans, if there's very many of those, I don't know too much about them.
I mean, I think like the 70s was such a economically for like everyday Americans was such an economically challenging time.
Yeah,
And then all of the disasters with the space shuttle in the 80s, I think those things kind of like really squelched the desire to reach very far. Um,
sure.
there were like weights around our ankles that we haven't let go yet.
Yeah. Well, obviously, the moon landings and stuff, in terms of their position in the cultural history, happened not long after the civil rights marches and so on. And so, at the time in '68 and '69, there was marches against the moon landings because they were saying, "Hey, what you doing spending $3 billion shooting two men up to a fucking rocket that's going to be there anyway when we've got people starving in our own country?" Which is an argument I do have some sympathy with, but at the same time, if we never shoot for the stars, we're never going to get anywhere. So
Yeah,
we got
I
to
don't.
balance.
I don't have a whole lot of. No, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for those arguments because we still hear those arguments about things now, and it's just like there's always going to be the needy. There's always going to be hungry. There's always going to be poor people. We can't use those issues as excuses to not reach out and to not reach further and to not try. Um, a lot of things that we use today in our everyday lives are a result of the space race. Are a
Well, what we're doing right now.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, those things that didn't seem like they had a whole lot of use or a whole lot of benefits have benefited us, immensely, far more than everybody thought they would. So,
Yeah. Yeah. The Green Machine points out that people will still line up to buy the newest iPhone.
yeah.
Human behavior in terms of consumer behavior um, fascinates me to no end. I don't know. This is going out a limb. The answer is probably no. But have you ever seen the documentary called? I think it's called "The Sale of the Century," and there's a series of documentaries. And in the first episode, it's all about this guy called Edward Bernays, who basically invented what we now consider to be advertising. He was the father of modern marketing because he was related in some way. I remember to Sigmund Freud. And so he was sort of getting into Sigmund Freud's early theories about what motivates people on a sort of more base level. And Eddie Bernays realized that rather than marketing to people, up here, you can market to them back here, to their subconscious, to their primal stuff. If you market to things they don't have a control over, so they're envy, greed, things like that. You can market things to people in a particular way, which will make your marketing more successful because of what human instincts are. So he changed the way we do marketing, and in fact, we probably wouldn't even have a consumer economy like we do if it wasn't for Edward Bernays. So yeah, he's a pretty big figure, and the interesting thing is that uh, most people that I'm acquainted with anyway don't know who he is. Hello there, Tommy from the Bronx. Yeah, 1,250 miles in the 80s. I assume you mean with the space shuttle when it blew up in 1986. That was a pretty heavy one. Um, I remember when the Challenger blew up because I was going to the drive-through window at my local McDonald's in Alaska, and they had the flag at the restaurant at half mast, and I'm like, "Why is the flag at half mast?" And they said, "Oh, the space shuttle just blew up," and my brain couldn't. It was kind of similar to September 11th. I mean, when you're watching it happen on a fucking TV, and your brain's still going, that can't be real. I'm watching a movie, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, related to what Tommy said a little earlier, Green Machine said that the shuttle disasters showed everyone how the government's been cutting corners on the things that we're most proud of.
Mm.
And that's right. I mean, that's directly related to what Tommy said. I mean, yeah, 6 failed to launch before the 86 explosion. And then there was, oh yeah. And then there were other explosions after that. I mean, it wasn't just the one.
Sure.
And is exactly what happened was the government cut corners. They didn't want to give NASA the money NASA needed to do what they need to do. Um, but there are still certain things. When NASA gets its funding, there are certain things that are attached to NASA's funding. Like you have to do this, 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 and this.
Right.
Otherwise, because you're getting the money, we're giving you the money. We demand that you do X, Y, and Z. Now,
Which is perfectly reasonable.
it's reasonable, and they don't put, like, from what I understand, the expectations on NASA aren't massive as far as we want people walking on the moon. I'm sorry, walking on Mars next year. Up to it. Here's the money. I mean, it's not that, but still, you have certain things that's expected of them, and they give them the money. So, yeah.
So what do you think about what do you think about the possibility of a manned mission to Mars?
What do you mean the possibility?
Well, I mean, like it takes depending on where the two planets are in relation to each other orbit-wise. I mean, I think the least amount of time it takes to fly in a spaceship from Earth to Mars is about 6 months. And
I think at their closest, I think it's 3. I think it's like about 3 months at the closest.
No. I'm pretty sure it's 6 months, unless something's changed drastically since the last time I looked.
something, yeah, something would have to be out of alignment to change that much. No, I thought it was 3, but I could be wrong. I just thought it was 3.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the technology to do it. It's feasible. We can do it.
It's the issue really becomes long-term captivity for the people that are going, because obviously a space capsule is pretty confined quarters, and so you got to be all right upstairs not to go mental. Just you and 1 or 2 other people in such a small space for such an extended period of time with no escape.
That would be part of their training, and we have people
Sure.
that stay on the International Space Station for long periods of time, so
Yeah.
it's not completely unheard of. The biggest thing that they really have to worry about is cosmic radiation, because we don't have any materials that can really stop it. It goes
Right.
through everything, and it causes cancer, and
Right.
worse things. I mean, it can make you go blind.
Well, the thing about living in space for an extended period of time is the oxygen in your bones. It can mess up your bones when you're not subjected to gravity for an extended period of time. I think the longest anyone's been in outer space is something like 14 or 15 months, and their bones were all fucked up when they got back. So I'm not sure what the longest recommended time is. I forgot all about the radiation issue. I was aware of it from when the moon were going up, but yeah, I forgot about that.
Water. I mean, water. I don't think it stops it. I think water is like the best shielding that we can have for it, though. It slows down the radiation enough to where it can stop. But you know what? You would have to have the walls of the craft would have to be so thick to be lined with enough water to make it feasible to have no damage at all. And then
water's heavy.
it's just going to go. You have to have fuel to be able to lift all that. So yeah, that's an issue. So 150 to 300 days. So
yeah, 150 days. That's 5 months. So yeah. Yeah.
How much fuel is being burned?
Yeah, a little bit of true trivia for you. Back in the year 2000, I'm pretty sure it was the Curiosity rover that NASA sent up. But back in those days, the internet was still pretty new in sort of 2000, right? And in 1999, my fiance, she went on the NASA website and the name, my name, her name, our dog's name, and my children's names are on a CD-ROM on the Mars Curiosity rover,
Oh,
uh,
nice.
along with thousands of other people who paid like a $5 or whatever to get your names on there. So I can't think it's kind of funny that my name is digitally on Mars.
You know, Mars is the planet Mars is 100% inhabited by robots.
Yeah, right.
There is a planet in our solar system that's inhabited by robots. It's pretty cool.
I think they're extreme. The whole idea of sending robots was obviously inspired. I mean, I remember when the Vikings went up. That was not a robot. It was like a spaceship that landed and had arms that went out and stuff. I think there was two Vikings that went to Mars actually. But then when they started sending those, the little rover machines up with the six wheels and whatever, I mean, it's really opened doors in Mars and stuff. And I'm quite excited about the idea that they're going to find evidence of previous life on Mars. Um, uh,
I mean, they found that all the ingredients for it were there
yeah,
at one time. So the odds of no life ever existing is pretty slim. Um, I'm like it, if they find out that there was like single celled organisms, very simplistic, very simple life. I mean, I think that's cool, and it would be massive, massive news. I would be really excited to find out about multicellular life. Something
sure.
more complex. That to me, that's something that would be really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, probably after I've come and gone, and assuming, of course, that we don't blow the world to smithereens, at some point we'll probably send some kind of craft to Europa, which is one of the moons of Jupiter, because it's solid water pretty much, and the crust, the outside of the planet is like miles thick ice, and the interior of the planet is all ocean, and so. Because of the water present, obviously, they postulate that there may be some kind of life there, but it would all be subterranean because it's frozen over. The whole surface is frozen over.
I believe Europa is on this. It's on their slate. Their schedule. Europa and Titan, I think, also.
Yeah, Titan is a moon of Saturn. Yeah, and that one's quite exciting because that one's got it's got its own atmosphere, and there's signs of lakes and rivers on Titan, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I think they're made of methane, though, aren't they? Is that Titan
I
or is that?
I actually can't. I think that's one of Neptune's moons, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that. It's been a while since I looked into that type of thing. Yeah, the Bronx said that we really need to start space exploration and find somewhere to colonize.
Yeah.
I'm dubious about the wisdom of colonizing space, unless you mean starting from, say, several different couples who are going to procreate and colonize that way. I don't think you can colonize space in numbers. I don't think you can send 1,000 people into space to colonize a planet. I think the most in terms of colonization, unless something drastically changes, the only heavenly body that we could probably realistically colonize is the moon, because it's too far to get everywhere else. You know?
That's another project that's already on the production line, so to speak.
Well,
They're
sure.
building a space station. I mean, that's the plan. We're supposed to start very soon. They're going to build a space station on the moon, and then mine minerals on the moon to use to build spacecraft on the moon.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If you're going to do it, you want to do it there. That way, you don't need the fuel to escape Earth.
Yeah, because it takes a hell of a lot. I can't remember the numbers because it's been a long time, but I remember just to carry an extra kilo. Everything is accounted for on a space capsule. Every pound is accounted for in terms of the fuel they need to get the motor they want and everything else like that. And I remember I watched when I was a young man. I think I watched a made-for-TV movie about a kid who stowed away on the spaceship, and so it ended up weighing 88 pounds because he was only 10. The ship weighed 88 pounds too much, and they didn't obviously discover the kid until it was too late and they were in space. That was a pretty good show, actually. I don't remember the name of it. If anybody in the audience ever saw that and knows the name of it, please do chime in. Anyway, but I've always been fascinated with space exploration and space travel, but just in a realistic, I personally don't believe that interstellar travel is possible. at all with a spacecraft. I don't think it's possible.
Yes and no. Um, we we right now possess the technology to send a craft unmanned to interstellar space.
Sure, the Voyager's gone past the Kuiper Belt
Well,
now.
I mean,
So,
even faster than Voyager. I mean, you're talking
mm,
little tiny craft about this big with solar sails that'll move at near the speed of light. We can
right,
do that. We know how to do that. We can do that. Um, and I mean, that's one of the things they're going to do. They've got a bunch of exoplanets that they have listed. I guess they have a list of them that they want to shoot some of these tiny little spacecraft at. They'll send like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them out at a time because most of them won't make it.
right,
They'll get destroyed on the way. But yeah, it's kind of like what do you call that? Scattershot.
right. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I think the prospect of exploring exoplanets is super fascinating. I'm so old, Rob, that I can remember when, in fact, I took astronomy in high school. Okay, so that's late 70s. And when I took astronomy, black holes were just a mathematical probability. They weren't proven to exist. When I took astronomy, um, uh, the idea of other planets around other stars was purely hypothetical. And when my high school teacher said there are no other planets, he actually said this solar system is the only solar system in the galaxy, because that's so long ago, Rob, that we didn't know quite how solar systems were formed yet.
It was
Now
the
we,
same for me when I was in school. That was the same for me. We had 9 planets, not 8. We had 9.
yeah,
Um, and whether or not there were other planets, maybe. Black holes were mathematical. Um, yeah, yeah. It was everything changed.
yeah. It's interesting because that stuff like that. When I start thinking about all the things that have changed, it really does make me feel like an old codger. You know, like for example, when I was in high school, I took geography. Geology as well, and we learned about this brand new theory in the '70s called plate tectonics, right? And at the time, it was not really. It was still just in consideration as a possible working model. Whereas now we know plate tectonics is how the world, shifts about.
When I was in 8th grade, um, our science class, when I was in 8th grade, at the beginning of the school year, the science teacher had to put a certain amount of time aside to give us a speech about everything we were about to learn that year was only theory.
Right?
Um, and I mean, and mostly what we were talking about was atoms. The structure of atoms and molecules and all that kind of
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, this isn't a theory. We know about this. This isn't. But at the time, you couldn't teach that stuff unless you added on that little bit of a disclaimer to it.
Which is partly, I'm sure, why people have a misunderstanding about the fact that a theory
That's
is.
exactly why.
We've had these discussions in the atheist community back in the day, as you're well aware. About the difference between the colloquial understanding of the word theory and the scientific understanding of the word theory. I mean, from a scientific point of view, gravity is only theoretic. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, like Green Machine, all science is only a theory, but there's different and you know this, Green Machine. There's different definitions of the word theory. There's a scientific definition, which everything in science is a theory, and then there's the layman's definition, where theory means we don't know.
Yeah, it's a guess, basically. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And to the extent it is an educated guess in science, but the point is it's highly an educated guess. Like
Not even here in the see a little bit of pushback on this one. The scientific definition of a theory is basically it's a collection of facts and observations that explain observable phenomena. A theory in science is stronger than a scientific law. A theory is the strongest term to describe
yeah,
reality.
yeah, sure.
Um,
But,
Layman's theory is a scientist's hypothesis. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, there you go. That's a good way to put it. No, I think whole space exploration and stuff like that, mining the moon. Part of me would weep if we mined the moon, but another part of me kind of knows it's inevitable. You know?
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
So,
I mean, we'll probably, be like a movie. We'll crack it or something. Um,
mm.
But it's inevitable.
I spend a lot of time since lockdown. I spent a lot of time meditating, and a lot of the things I've been meditating on more recently is what's going to happen in the future. Because obviously none of us have foresight. None of us really know what's going to happen. But I think an awful lot about this a bit off the beaten track. But one thing I think about is future archaeology. When I first came to the UK, Rob, I was quite fascinated by all the old stuff here because obviously I come from California where most things are not more than 100 years old, except for trees. You know, but I mean, here in Britain, there's loads of like profoundly old stuff. And when I used to live in the West Country, I'd go and visit stone circles and standing stones and stuff like that, where they've got these stone circles, smaller than Stonehenge, but still good sized stone circles. And you look at them and you can't imagine how people way back in those days, A, could have made them, B, why did they make them? But more than that, I was in Cornwall at a stone circle called the Merry Maidens, and all Cornish stone circles have 19 stones in them. And so I was in the middle of the circle counting the stones out. And when you're in a stone circle, those stones, Rob, have been there in that same spot for 4,500 years, right? And I wonder when I look at our modern world, these are certainly not going to be here in 4,000 years. And I'm wondering what current achievements, whether it's architectural or otherwise, what artifacts that we have in our modern society that are still going to be functional 4,000 years from now.
Plastics. Yeah, I mean, 4,000 years from now, our time period is going to be known for plastics. Like most of what we do today, everything is magnetic storage, and magnetic storage is great for right now, but it doesn't have a really long shelf life. So yeah, most of our even the records that we're making now of our own time aren't going to last.
Sure. No, especially digital records. I mean, it's because there's no hard copy. Once this stuff fails, there will be no retrieving it.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, like your cell phone is your own little personal library of Alexandria that will eventually cease to be. So
I actually find the future quite fascinating to contemplate. And let's just take as a working hypothesis that we're not going to blow each other up with nuclear weapons. Let's just, as a working hypothesis, say we managed to avoid that for another 75 years. So what do you think 2050 looks like in America?
2050?
2050. Oh, let's shoot closer than that first. Let's go 2030, 10 years. 10 years doesn't sound like long. And you look back to 2010 and you think, okay, things have changed, but they necessarily haven't changed drastically.
I don't see a big difference. I think cultural divides are going to get wider. Yeah, that's about it.
Why would you say that though? Why? I mean, at the moment, Trump in America anyway. Trump is obviously deliberately stroking divisions because it suits his agenda.
Yeah, but he isn't. But he isn't causing them. He's a product of them.
I agree. He's not causing them. He's encouraging them though, for sure.
Right. But he's also a product of them. He's where he is because of them. And he is fanning the flames, and he's, making that gap wider. But I mean, it's already on a trajectory. It's going to continue to get wider no matter what happens.
Yeah, I agree. Tommy from the Bronx just mentioned that nuclear weapons won't kill the planet, but humans could possibly kill it. I suppose you mean, Tommy, with climate change and stuff like that. But I think even that, I mean, nuclear weapons, I mean, George Carlin made that point in a stand-up comedy sketch like 25 years ago about how, it's not the planet that's in danger. It's us that's in danger, because the
Planet
planet,
will shake us off like a bad case of fleas.
and it's exactly what's going to happen to us. I mean, when I used to occasionally fill out internet quizzes and stuff a lot back when there was less things to do on the internet. And one of the questions used to always be, what would you, if you had 3 wishes, what would your wishes be? And my third wish is always, I would really like to see the ultimate fate of humankind. I mean, do we just evolve into a higher form of sapien, or will we be the instrument of our own demise? And if so, how is that going to happen? Famine, plague, war, or civilization just going to fall to the point where it's irretrievable and falls apart because we can't sustain ourselves because nobody knows, everybody who's alive doesn't remember how to skin an animal and plant a tree like that. You know what I mean?
There's most people who are into science fiction will be familiar with this, but like there's the concept of the great filter, and anybody who's paying attention also would be aware that if they've heard of the great filter, would be aware that as a civilization, as a global civilization, we are approaching the great filter. And do you know what the great filter is?
No, I'm not familiar.
Um, the great filter is this concept where civilizations they'll grow to a point, then either they will die off, they kill each other, kill themselves through pollution, nuclear war, whatever, right? And if they don't, if they manage to get past all the obstacles, they eventually become a very advanced interplanetary, interstellar traveling species. Right. The idea to get to that advancement is to get through the great filter. And it's speculated that in the entire universe there has got to be some civilizations that have made it. Our civilization is approaching the great filter, and we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. In no way in hell that Earth is going to survive the great filter.
Wow.
We are going to kill ourselves. This planet is doomed.
Well, I obviously, because I've got kids and you've got kids, so I hope that there's hope for the future. I really do. But I have to say that
there's hope for their future. But for our species, for our civilization, for the planet, no, we're doomed. This planet's doomed.
yeah, Tommy from the Bronx, I can't put my glasses on because my glasses are for only long vision, and in short vision, I have to squint. No, yeah, I really, really, really would like to know. Obviously, there's no way for me to know because I'm not going to live long enough to find out the ultimate fate of humankind. Having said that, because I'm a student, a lay student. I'm I don't go to college or anything, but I'm a lay student of archaeology and have been for quite a long time in my life. And I look back at like previous civilizations which have risen and fallen, and last year, my daughter and my sister went to Mexico together, and they went to this old ruined city. I can't pronounce it. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but it's like Tizuacan or something like that.
Yeah,
Jiuacan or whatever like that. And it's really famous. It's in the ruins of the city. And this was a proper industrialized city. They've got the pyramid in the city with it's like a stepped pyramid, not smooth sides like Egyptians, but stepped up. And in the town, there's like evidence that they had municipal buildings like schools and basically council buildings and stuff like that. The apartments, everyone lived in apartments and stuff like that. So it was a highly advanced civilization, highly advanced. And that's what really gets me is we had highly advanced civilizations before ours, like that one in Mexico or others in Mexico as well that have fallen. Or the Egyptians as well, the Egyptians had electricity, for Christ's sake, huh?
The Sumerians.
Yeah, Sumerians as well. So you look back at all. I mean, Egyptian civilization lasted for 4,000 years before it fell, and that blows my mind.
Couple of things actually. I like kind of tie some of this stuff together. Deep ashtray. The Earth will survive. The question is, will we be there to see it? Yeah, the planet itself, the rock that we're on, will still be here. And Green Machine, to get your shit together, or else filter. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, right.
And like all like previous great civilizations of Earth, the great filter, it's the same, like it's the same concept. All those different civilizations, they died off, they disappeared for whatever it was, whatever reason they fell. It was war, or it was there have been civilizations, not great civilizations, but civilizations where they killed themselves by cutting down all the trees. That happened
Right.
on Easter Island, and it happened on the mainland U.S. There was a Native American civilization that killed itself by cutting down all the trees. Um, they were mistakes. They didn't make it through that filter.
Right.
The Egyptians had a great run. They made it through many filters. They eventually failed to get through a filter. So our global civilization is headed for a filter, and we're not going to make it.
Yeah.
We're not going
I
to
mean,
make
I think Egypt only really fell because Rome was on the rise. If it wasn't for Rome rising, who knows what would have happened?
it. Yeah, another great civilization that didn't make it through the filter. Um, it happens. It happens. Interesting thing about the like the Aztecs and the Inca. Um, Specifically the Aztecs, though. Oxford University was founded while the Aztec Empire was at its strongest.
Wow.
Uh, it's a kind of a fucked up thing to think about, that those two things were happening at the same time. But Oxford was around at the same time the Aztecs were. So,
Wow. I didn't know that, but it makes sense, obviously, because I mean, I think it wasn't until Cortez conquered, Central and South America that the Aztec civilization fell.
yeah.
Which is like the 15th century or something like that, or 16th century, whatever it was. I can't remember which century it was Cortez was doing his thing, but I remember when Cortez was going through the northern part of South America, him and his men killed 3 million people in 1 year.
Yeah.
And when I read that statistic when I was in high school, where my brain instantly goes is, okay, I go through 3 million divided by 365, and how many people were they killing every day? You know what I mean? And it's a shocking number, and like what
the Americas in general, the Americas, from the tip of South America to Alaska, before the Europeans came on their great conquest, was full of people. I
Yeah.
mean, hundreds of millions of people, with trading networks that went from coast to coast, North America into South America. I mean, these are all, what Europeans thought of as savages. They had pretty intricate and well networked and connected trading systems and relationships that spanned
Sure.
both continents. Um, they didn't have a whole lot of technology, but that's it. That was all they were lacking. It was,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Well,
they lived in civilizations that were just like completely, awash with resources. I
well,
mean,
that's right. I mean, you mentioned the Aztecs a minute ago. I'm pretty sure that's they had a city that was supposedly, in quotation marks, made of gold. Now, I don't know that means the buildings were like literally made out of gold, but I think it means that everything, a lot of stuff had gold leaf, on it.
yeah.
And so obviously that got completely ransacked by the and pillaged by the Europeans. I think, yeah, it was mostly Spain again as well that did that. Uh, it's just kind of like, I understand human greed, and if you're going to come all the way across the 3,000-mile ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, to come and exploit the resources in this new world where the people there are savages who you clearly gun in every way and can dominate in any meaningful way, so you can go and steal what you like, but it is so hard for me, when you read these things about history. It's hard for me to put myself in those places because I'm just not a violent person, for example. So when I think about these guys butchering 3 million people in a year, and you think about the level of carnage that implies, and it's just regular dudes, Rob, like me and you, regular guys
Regular
going
guys.
on,
Yeah, just
and hundreds of people every day, women, children, everyone.
there was before like Columbus and Cortez, before those guys came over, there was a series of basically plagues of diseases that came from Europe that made it to the Americas that killed off millions and millions of people before Europeans even got here.
Yeah.
Um,
It's also true, especially in the United States part of North America. I mean, some of our early settlers would deliberately give a native tribe a blanket as a gift, which was
oh yeah,
infused with smallpox.
yes.
And the whole tribe is wiped out from smallpox, because smallpox is extremely virulent and also pretty damn deadly and very painful by the look of it. I mean, it looks horrible when you see pictures of people with smallpox. I mean, oh my God, it looks terrible.
We come off as a bit shifty. Um, yeah, I mean, even like well before, a couple hundred years before that, I mean, there was a massive die off of the natives. So when the Europeans came, the numbers were just starting to rebound.
Right.
They were just starting to because I mean they're talking about like about anywhere between like a 60 and 80% die off of the natives. And those numbers were on the rebound when the Europeans showed up. So here was Europeans showing up on a continent they had never seen before, filled with people that they didn't speak the same language. Europeans are carrying diseases that these people never saw, and an entire continent of people that are already dealing with a massive destruction.
Mm.
And Europeans wrote back to Europe with things like, there's entire places that are ready to build for cities. Yeah, because cities were already there.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a city there before. That's why these fields where they built, like some of our cities, American cities today, were built on top of the sites of Native American cities.
Yeah.
It's pre-existing cities. And it's like, oh wow, look, it's ready for building. It's perfect. It's already got roads. We just need to, it's yeah, yeah, yeah. This whole westward expansion from Europe
What kind of interesting?
um, was a clusterfuck before they even got here. Before they even got here, and then it was just like, oh well, we fought and earned this land. We tamed this frontier. No,
Mm.
you didn't.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's loads of evidence to show that, for example, the Vikings found the Americas 500 years before Columbus supposedly
They were
discovered
the
it.
ones. They were the ones that kicked off the die-off.
Right. And obviously, I've always thought it was funny, and I think I said this back on the original Breakfast Club channel when you were running it with Steve Shives and the rest of us, because we did a series about Columbus Day, as I recall back then, and because Steve was there sort of very highly against the celebration of Columbus Day, as am I, because if you know anything about what Columbus did in terms of when he got to what is now the Dominican Republic. He enslaved the entire island. You know what I mean? They killed hundreds and hundreds of people.
Right.
So they can in no way be seen as heroes just because they went across an ocean, in my opinion. You can't discover something that was already people there,
Right.
So.
One interesting thing about Columbus that I'm like, okay, I'll give him that. I'll give him that. He was the first European to see the Pacific Ocean.
Columbus saw the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, not on his first voyage, but he actually went across to Mexico, and he saw the Pacific Ocean. He was the first European to see the Pacific Ocean.
I did not know that. I did not know that. I always thought Magellan.
It's like, who gives a shit? But
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, it's a good thing for him anyway. It's a good thing that he didn't try to get from the what is the eastern shore of, but it's the west coast of America. Because like getting from Europe to America, that's 3,000 miles across the water. If you want to get from California to China, that's about 7,000 miles across the water.
about that, yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot different. I think at some point, I wonder if, because it is only sort of 3 months in a boat from Europe to America, back in those days, anyways. Yeah, 3 months, and I wonder how long they would have gone on before they had to turn back. I mean, because if you're trying to cross the Pacific and you don't know how big it is, sooner or later you're going to run out of fruit and veg and everything like that, and all you're going to be eating is fish. There won't be nothing left. And then obviously, even crossing the Atlantic back in the day, people used to get scurvy because they would not have enough vitamin C in their diet and stuff.
Marco Polo didn't see the Pacific. Good
No,
point.
I don't think he did. I don't think he did.
If he had, it would have been obviously from the other side. But I actually hadn't even. I don't know.
I don't think he did. I think he probably would have stopped at Peking, as was now Beijing, obviously. But I don't know for sure. I haven't studied that. And it's been fun. I can't even remember when we learned about Marco Polo. I must have been 12 last time I studied Marco Polo. So it's been a while. I'm a bit rusty.
Polynesians crossed the Pacific, but they weren't European. It was first European.
Yeah.
Polynesians were Polynesian.
Yeah, Polynesians, they descend from Southeast Asians.
Yeah.
Here's something I'd like you to roll around in your head, right? And audience members, please also chime in on this question. But I remember when Ronald Reagan was president, okay, and he was visiting Russia for the first time, and he was in one of the universities there with a bunch of Russian students at the time, and there was like a question and answer thing, and one of the Russian students stood up and said, "How can you call America democracy when you've got an entire subjugated an entire race and don't let them vote," meaning the Native Americans, right? And they said, how can you say, why do you put these people on reservations? You stole their land and gave them places they didn't even live before and said, here, live here now. And the reservations, as you must know, got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller over time, to the point where they're campgrounds for natives now is what they are, or compared to what they ever were. And so the question I want to ask you, because Ronald Reagan answered the student, he said, maybe our ancestors 100 years ago should say to the natives, come and join us and be part of our civilization, rather than say, okay, you have this separate area and do your own thing. Do you think that would have been better or worse if we did say, look, you can't have no reservations, join us or die?
It depends. It depends on what you mean by better and what you mean by worse. It depends on what you're looking at. Would there be the alcohol and drug issues that the native population has? Would the suicide rate be as high as it is for natives? Probably not. So in that way, yeah, it would have been better. On the other hand, you would have lost cultural identities of great civilizations. So
and they're struggling to hold on to those identities even with reservations.
Yeah, they struggle to hold on to even with the reservations. So I don't know. I don't know. I think in some ways the lives of those people would have been better had they been assimilated into our culture. And in other ways, I think it would have been a great loss. So I don't know.
I'm not sure I know either. I've thought about it quite a lot since I saw Reagan give that speech, because I thought to myself, at the time, I was only like 23 or whatever. And at the time, I'm like, well, clearly it's not okay to just say, hey, love it, join us or die. That's not okay. You know what I mean? Join us or else. That's not okay. Nothing under duress is really okay. But that's also true for reservations. That was clearly under duress as well. You know what I mean? And I just find it interesting how culturally almost we seem to want to polish over the fact that every inch of America is stolen.
Yeah. Yep. The entire country is occupied land.
Yeah. And the native peoples don't seem to have anything to show for it in terms of recompense. I mean, when's the last time you saw a Native American family just chilling at the movie theater?
When? Last year.
Wow. I can say never for me. And there's Native American reservations near where I come from as well.
Yeah,
but I've never seen.
I was last year. We went to Washington State. There's a large native population in Washington, and we went to the movies. We saw Endgame, at the movies in Washington, and there was a lot of Native people at the movies and stuff.
Sure. Okay. Wow, that's pretty cool.
So yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I mean the natives in the Pacific Northwest have it better than natives in other parts of the country, especially the Navajo. The Navajo have a real hard time. Navajo Nation, I believe, is the largest of the sovereigns. Um,
I don't know.
I believe they're the largest. I think we were just talking about them on the news the other night because they're having a real problem with COVID. They're actually the worst hit in the country. It is the Navajo. Um,
Wow.
yeah, the governor of Arizona, no, New Mexico, the governor, I don't know, one of those states. The governor there is doing a lot to help them out and trying to get federal help. Actually, some of the problems they're having falls under the responsibility of the federal government because of treaties. So I don't know.
That's pretty cool. Hey, Rob, have you ever been that part of the country down the desert states?
Not since I was little.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. As I've only been there a couple times. I went to the Grand Canyon back in 1988, which is
Never.
something I think every American should do just as an obligation.
I so badly want to go. I've never been there.
It's beyond breathtaking, as you can obviously tell that from the pictures, right? But I mean, when me and my friend Kenny, my roommate at the time, we drove from Santa Rosa. It was about 1,000 miles from where I come from in Santa Rosa to the Grand Canyon, and so we drove that in a day. And when we got there, obviously we were completely bushed because you really shouldn't drive 1,000 miles in a day, but you can just about do it, you know. Anyway, so yeah, we got there. We were bush. We set up camp, and then the next morning, but we were looking at the map because we're driving towards it from across, I think Nevada at the time. We're driving towards it, and thinking, okay, are we going to go to the southern face of the Grand Canyon or the northern face? And because from the direction we were coming from, the northern face was closer, so we went there first. What a huge mistake, Rob! Because I wanted to go down into the canyon, right? Which you can do from the
Right.
northern side. But from the top of the canyon to the bottom of the canyon is a little over 1 mile, okay, from top to bottom. And of course, you can't go straight down. You got to zigzag your way down. So zigzag your way down to get down on the cliffs. You're walking about 4 miles downhill the whole time. Your calves are ready to burst. By the time you get to the bottom of that fucking cliff, man, your calves are about 8 inches bigger and rock solid. You could crack an egg on them, right? And
Right.
and you get down to the bottom. So it's like 6,000 feet, right? I think it's like 6,300 feet to the bottom. And so we finally got there and we were completely spent, even though we're both young men. We didn't bring anywhere near enough provisions. We straight away stuck our faces in the river and drank the water straight out of the river because we were parched. We didn't have anything left, you know. And there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing. We didn't have anything left. We didn't bring enough. We brought stuff, but it didn't make it all the way to the bottom, much less, you know, all the way back up the next day. Anyway, bit of an anecdote, right? So the following day, we went back up the other way, which is, again, murder on your shins, murder on your calves and your legs because you're still sore from yesterday's trek. So we're climbing up the bloody cliff, right? I'm wrong. It was when we're climbing down the cliff the night before. And so this dude's coming up the cliff as we're going down the cliff, right? He had the look of money about him. That's all I will say. You could tell from the way this man looked that he had been living the good life for some time. Okay. When we met up with this guy, it was about 10:30 in the morning. We were halfway down the cliff on our descent into the canyon. This motherfucker was 77 years old and had walked all the way from the southern face to the northern face. He camped in the middle the night before, left at 7 o'clock in the morning. He was already halfway across and halfway up the other side at the age of 77. And he looked at us and we're in our mid-20s, dying down. And he's like, what are you guys so tired for? And anyway, yeah. And then so the next day after we got out of the canyon, we drove around to the southern face to have a look at that. And you can walk right down. Ain't no cliff. You can walk right down. No cliff, no struggle, no nothing. But yeah, to get from the southern face to the northern face is about a 26-mile walk along the bottom of the canyon. And that guy did it in 2 days, 26 miles at the age of 77, you know? So I'm always impressed by that. I hope I'm in that kind of shape when I'm 77, but I don't anticipate such.
I hope I get to be 77.
Well, yeah, I suppose, yeah, that's one thing as well. Yeah, I go through since shutdown particularly, I go through at least weekly existential dread. How about you? Are you pondering your own existence more or anything like that? I mean, are you getting way more philosophical or I suppose because a lot anyway, so it's not that much different for you. So
Um, yeah, no, no, not really. I mean, no, no.
yeah, fair play. Yeah, fair play. Listen, because I didn't have any sleep last night, I think I'm gonna have to wrap up the show
All right.
because I'm flagging here, man. And yeah, I'm sorry to everybody for making it a short one this week. But yeah, Friday night I got literally zero sleep. I didn't even get 40 winks, nothing. So I'm pretty spent. So I want to thank you, Rob, for coming, and I want to thank everybody in the audience for coming as well and participating. And next week, I'm going to make a point of bugging people next week for sure, and see if we can get. Let's see if we can start out with 6 next time. That'd be nice. That'd be a nice. We can start off with 6 and then have people drop off rather than start out with 2 and have people join on. I think that would be way better. So
No.
I'm gonna write a stern letter to my people.
Vigorously shake your head.
Yeah. And yeah, gesticulate generally. Anyway, all right. Again, thanks to the audience for participating, and thank you, Rob, very much. And we'll see you again next week. All right. I'm going to end the broadcast now. Peace and joy, everybody.